When my landlord handed me the eviction notice, he wouldn't look me in the eye. I had just lost my job as a senior architectural designer 48 hours earlier, and now I was being thrown out of my apartment. Desperate, I called my parents for help. Instead of sympathy, my mom laughed. "You have to fall before you can change," she said coldly. Then my dad added, "A few nights sleeping outside will finally teach you some humility." My heart shattered. But then I noticed a detail on my landlord's desk. A brand new envelope containing exactly 10 crisp $100 bills, right next to a text message notification on his phone from my mother's number. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had paid him $1,000 to kick me onto the streets. I hung up, took a deep breath, and made one single call. My name is Rosie, and at 28, I thought I had finally escaped the suffocating shadow of my parents, Richard and Eleanor. For years, they controlled every aspect of my life, treating my achievements as their own and my failures as their entertainment. I worked 80-hour weeks to build a career as a senior architectural designer, solely to prove I didn't need their money or their approval. But life has a cruel way of pulling the rug from under you. Yesterday, my firm suddenly announced massive corporate downsizing. Just like that, my hard-earned security vanished. Still numb from the shock, I returned to my apartment only to find an eviction notice taped to my door. I immediately marched down to the leasing office to confront my landlord, Mr. Vance. I had never missed a single rent payment in 3 years. "Mr. Vance, what is the meaning of this?" I demanded, holding up the paper. He avoided my gaze, nervously shuffling some paperwork on his mahogany desk. "It's just business, Rosie. The owner wants the unit back." That's when I saw it. Resting right next to his keyboard was a plain white envelope, overflowing with 10 crisp $100 bills. Beside it, his phone screen lit up with a text notification. The preview was fully visible, sent from a contact saved as Eleanor. It read, "The cash is delivered. Make sure she is out by Friday." The room spun. My parents had paid my landlord to throw me directly onto the street. I didn't let Mr. Vance see the tears pricking my eyes. Instead of giving him the satisfaction of a breakdown or begging my parents for mercy, I quietly turned around and walked out of the leasing office. The betrayal burned hot in my chest, but it also lit a spark of cold, sharp clarity. My parents wanted to break me so I would crawl back to them, begging for their help and signing away my freedom. I wasn't going to let that happen. As soon as the heavy glass doors of the lobby closed behind me, I pulled out my phone. I didn't dial my mother, and I certainly didn't dial my father. Instead, I scrolled down to a contact I hadn't called in 5 years, Uncle Arthur. Arthur was my father's older brother, a self-made real estate mogul who had cut ties with my parents decades ago after realizing just how deeply their greed and manipulation ran. He had always been my silent supporter, the only person who recognized my parents' toxic behavior for what it truly was. The phone rang twice before a deep, warm voice answered. "Rosie? Is everything all right, kiddo?" Hearing his voice made my throat tighten, but I forced the words out. I told him everything. The layoff, the eviction, and the envelope of cash sitting on Mr. Vance's desk. Arthur went completely silent. When he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous, icy edge. "Pack your bags, Rosie, but don't leave just yet. I'm handling this." I stood in the courtyard of my apartment building, watching the autumn leaves swirl around my boots, counting the minutes. Exactly 9 minutes after I hung up with Uncle Arthur, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Go back inside. Enjoy the show." I pushed open the heavy glass doors and walked back into the leasing office. Mr. Vance was still sitting at his desk, but the smug, dismissive look on his face had completely vanished. He was clutching his desk phone to his ear, his face so pale he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir," Vance stammered, his voice trembling violently. "But I was just—" He was cut off by whoever was on the other end. I stood there, crossing my arms, watching him sweat. What Mr. Vance didn't know was that he didn't own this building. He was a low-level property manager for a massive corporate real estate trust, and Uncle Arthur's holding company just happened to be the majority shareholder of that entire trust. Vance slowly lowered the receiver, staring at me in absolute terror. "Rosie, please." That was the regional director. "They've terminated my contract, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and fair housing violations. They're threatening a lawsuit over the bribe." He pushed the $1,000 envelope toward me with shaking hands. "Please, tell them it was a mistake. I'll renew your lease right now. For free." I picked up my apartment keys from his desk, smiling coldly. "No thanks, Vance." I had barely stepped out of the lobby when my phone rang. The flashing caller ID read, "Mother." I took a deep, steadying breath, reminding myself of Uncle Arthur's plan, and pressed answer. "Rosie, darling." Eleanor's voice was dripping with synthetic pity. "We heard about your job. And now? Your apartment? It's just devastating." "How did you know about my apartment?" I asked, keeping my voice small and trembling to play the part. My dad, Richard, must have been on speakerphone. "Word travels fast, Rosie. It's a shame, but you brought this on yourself. You wanted independence, and look exactly where it got you." "I don't know what to do," I whispered, letting a fake sob slip through. "I have nowhere to go." "Well," my mother sighed theatrically, "we aren't monsters. We'll let you stay in our basement. But on one condition. You need to sign over control of your grandmother's trust. Clearly, you aren't mature enough to handle your own affairs." The greed in her voice was sickening. My grandmother's trust was a modest sum, but they had been trying to claw their way into it for years. "Okay," I sniffled, swallowing down my disgust. "I'll sign whatever you want. I just need a place." "Smart girl," my father snickered, smug victory clear in his tone. "Meet us at Le Petit Laurent tomorrow at noon. We'll bring the paperwork and celebrate your return." "I'll be there, Mother," I said, and hung up, smiling coldly into the quiet afternoon air. Le Petit Laurent was suffocatingly quiet, the kind of expensive restaurant where people spoke in hushed whispers over linen tablecloths. My parents were already seated when I arrived, looking like royalty preparing to accept a surrender. My mother didn't even stand. She just pushed a heavy stack of legal papers across the table, right next to her glass of sparkling water. "Sign on the dotted lines, Rosie," she said, her voice completely devoid of any maternal warmth. "Once the trust is legally under our management, we can go load your things into the car. It's for your own good." "You really think I'm that stupid, don't you?" I asked, sitting down but leaving the papers completely untouched. My dad laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that made the waiter nearby blink. "Stupid? No, Rosie, just desperate. You have no job, no apartment, and by tomorrow, you'll be a vagrant. You don't have the luxury of negotiating with us." "Actually, she does," a deep, booming voice interrupted. My parents froze. The smug, victorious smiles vanished from their faces in an instant, replaced by identical expressions of absolute horror as Uncle Arthur walked up to our table. He didn't wait for an invitation. He pulled out the empty chair right next to me and sat down, dropping a thick leather portfolio onto the linen cloth with a heavy, deliberate thud. "Arthur?" My father gasped, his face turning an ash-gray color. "What the hell are you doing here? This is a private family matter." "It stopped being a private matter when you decided to break the law to ruin my niece," Arthur said coldly. He opened the portfolio and slid out a copy of the recorded statement from Mr. Vance, alongside bank records proving the $1,000 bribe. "What is this trash?" my mother hissed, though her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her fork against the porcelain plate. "You think you can intimidate us, Arthur? We are her parents. We have every right to guide her." "You have the right to remain silent, Eleanor. If I decide to hand this over to the police," Uncle Arthur replied, his voice deadly calm. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. You see, Richard, you always thought you were the smartest businessman in the room. But you never actually read the conditions of Mother's estate, did you? My father swallowed hard, his soft jaw tightening as he stared at his older brother. What are you talking about? The trust belongs to Rosie, but if she is incapacitated or financially unstable... If she is financially unstable due to your intentional interference or coercion, Arthur interrupted smoothly, pointing a finger at the document, the entire remaining family estate, including your primary residence and the commercial accounts you've been living off of, instantly transfers to Rosie. It's an automated trigger clause. Mother knew exactly what kind of people you were. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's eyes darted frantically from Arthur to the papers, realizing the trap they had walked right into. By paying my landlord to evict me to force the trust transfer, they hadn't just failed to steal my inheritance, they had legally forfeited their own wealth. Rosie, please, my dad stammered, his smug composure completely shattered as he looked at me. We're your parents. We did it to teach you a lesson. You can't do this to us. You wanted to teach me a lesson about hitting rock bottom, Dad, I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of regret. But it looks like you're the ones who are going to learn it instead. I stood up, leaving them staring blankly at the legal ruins of their own greed. Within 30 days, the automated clause took full effect. Uncle Arthur's legal team handled the asset transition flawlessly. My parents were forced to downsize drastically, losing the estate they had used as a weapon for decades. My father took a low-level consulting job just to cover their new expenses, while my mother had to adapt to a life without country club memberships or designer labels. As for me, I didn't take a single dime of their forfeited money for personal luxury. With Arthur's guidance, I used those assets to secure a gorgeous new condo and launch my own independent architectural consulting firm. Today, my business is thriving, and I am finally building a life on a foundation of genuine independence and peace. Looking back, that eviction notice wasn't the end of my world. It was the beginning of my freedom. But now I'm incredibly curious about all of you who have listened to my story until the very end. What would you have done if you discovered your own parents paid your landlord to throw you out on the street? Comment below with your thoughts and the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Thank you so much for watching.